So you were wondering why I thought this might be worth doing, right?
Yeah, I'm curious why you think this is. Yeah, because I had called you to share something that was still very vivid, very real for me because it happened
Yeah.
on Thursday night, right after our recording. So I had been holding on to it, and then I we had talked, and I forgot to had mentioned it to you, and I felt just the release of needing to say what happened to me,
Yeah.
and I thought it was important just to share it with you.
Yeah.
What transpired in that conversation later was sort of, well, what that wasn't fair, and had it been someone else, what could have happened
Yeah.
to other people?
Yeah.
Because I said what I said to the police officers, which I can relate later,
Yeah.
but I feel like what happened to me was very mild, but it was very not all right. It wasn't all right. It just I have been approached by police officers in the past, and that hasn't happened to, well, it has happened to me. This has happened to me before with another friend, but most of my interactions with police officers, um, me, not the world and what happens out there, but I've had other experiences. I'll say not most. I've had other experiences where it has not happened like it happened on Thursday night.
Yeah. I mean, I I don't know what would have happened to someone else, but to me, that's not important. That is important, but I know that what you told me did happen was pretty outrageous. So
Yeah,
I felt like it's something that, because we do actually, we don't necessarily have this massive audience, but we have a format for exposing these things. So I felt like let's go ahead and put a real face behind how this shit goes down with the police sometimes.
yeah,
Kenny, I don't know if you want to.
So yeah, I'm curious, about your experience. I may just sprinkle in some of my own experience because I have some run-ins with the police. Not as violent, or as it sounds from we'll go into your story, but it's still it's still very interesting. And so I'm curious as to what you went through, you personally, your emotions, because um, yeah, it's sadly it's not new.
Yeah.
And they don't ask questions first. I think, unfortunately, the approach is to escalate things rather than de-escalation. And so, but I'm curious, as to what happened to you, and I'm really kind of in the blind. I know just vaguely, but yeah, I'm really
yeah,
interested in your story.
So I think what Kenny said is a perfect entry point for starting. And from everything I know about the story, Kenny, without even knowing the story, because Kenny, you don't know the story, do you? He pretty much described everything that happened. And that's interesting to me. It's interesting that you already captured all the features to me of the story. So
I mean,
I think, Eduardo, it's just worth just starting, and like as if you're speaking to Kenny, you know.
yeah, yeah. Well, what happened was Thursday night. I received a call from a friend. I I won't say his name here, but he's deaf, and he during this shelter in place mandate, he's been feeling somewhat isolated, especially since he is deaf, and it's challenging sometimes to communicate with the people you live with if you're the only one that can sign and your family only speaks and they're hearing folks. So he asked me uh, on his way to work, because he works in South San Francisco, if he could stop by and we could chat. And I said, yes, we can. And it was right after our own episode on Thursday night, uh, which ended late, I think 9:30, 10. And so I said, all right. And so we went into his van, and he said, let's drive somewhere nice, where we could potentially see most of the city on a hill or something, where we can just chat. And so he thought maybe we could go to McLaren Park, which is very close to where I live. And so we drove there, and we parked, and we decided to have a chat there, and we turned off the lights. Everything was just sort of, there were I think there are two other cars that were parked there. And I do remember there was at least one other car parked there. So we were just sitting, and the lights are on because, when you're signing, it's a visual language. So you have to sign, in the light.
The car light is on.
Yes, yeah. The inside of the car light is on. So we're quite visible. And so we're signing away. Then I think after 40 minutes, we hear some firecrackers out in the distance, not close to where we are, but in the distance. We're sort of like, oh, what's that? That's when 2 or 3 minutes after that, a police officer car pulls over right in front of the van and shows our light brightly right onto us, and we're not able to see. And immediately, the only thing I thought is like, oh shoot, if this officer doesn't have any training to deal with deaf and hard hearing, they're going to do something real stupid, because they'll think that a deaf person is defying or not listening, because they don't understand. They can't hear because the instructions, they just won't be able to understand the instructions. And police officers usually, they shine a very bright light on you. And for a deaf person, that you're very obscuring their eyes, which prevents them from figuring out how to, because their language is visual. It isn't auditory. And so I hear rather, he didn't hear it. I hear the officer, what is it, with a megaphone or attached to the vehicle, say, put your hands up, and start cursing. I don't remember every single curse word here, but they started cursing.
Can you give examples of the cursing? Like what? Like,
yeah,
damn, what?
Well, when they did the megaphone, no, when they got out, they said, put your fucking hands up. Put your fucking hands up. They started yelling. And we put our hands up in the car, and I tried to sign immediately to tell him, let me interpret for you, don't move. But as soon as I did that, don't fucking move, like that. And I thought, how will he be able to understand what is going on? I won't be able to, if I can't move. I mean, you can't. He has to understand what is going on. And so the police officers surround. There's two. They surround over to the side of the windows, and I start yelling out, "He is deaf!" Even though the windows are blocked, he is deaf. He is deaf, and the guns were already drawn. The guns were already drawn. I do remember that, and I'm trying to make sure that what I say that is going to be on record, because it's be out there on YouTube forever. If I doubt it, but if there is, the SFPD does get whiff of this video and they decide to release video footage, I am very, very, very can feel confident saying that the guns were drawn. The guns were drawn, and so they surround the furgoneta, como se dice, van, and come over on my side, and I keep saying, he's deaf, he's deaf. The car door is open. Don't fucking move. And I and then when they open the door, I say, "He is deaf." I keep yelling. I keep being repetitive. Anyone who knows me on this episode knows that I keep repeating myself lots and lots and lots. And so I just want to make sure that it's in there. It's right there, that they get it. They didn't say anything to that. They pull me out.
By grabbing your clothes, by grabbing
They pull me out. Yes, they pull me out, and I'm just watching for my friend, and I can't see everything because my specs are not on. Like mis gafas, and so I can't see. It's sort of blurry. At the same time, the lights are real bright. Everything is happening too fast. Oh, I keep yelling out, and I say, as I'm being handled, and I say really loud, "Be careful with him. Be careful with him. Be careful with him. He is deaf. He does not understand what's happening." And I'm saying, "Shut up. Shut the fuck up." I'm being told. And I'm saying, "You need to know that he is deaf. He is deaf." And I can just see the headlines already. I yell out. I can see the headlines already. Police officers shoot school educator and disabled person. Imagine that. And they tell me, "What the fuck was that sound? What was that?" And I say, "How am I supposed to know? How is that connected to us? You tell me. You're the police officers. We're not. You're supposed to be doing your job." And they say, "Shut the fuck up." And they're like, and so I'm on the ground, and they open the back doors and they start checking. And I said, they keep asking, the male white officer keeps asking me, "What was that noise?" Asking me insistently. And I said, "I don't know. How is that connected to us? This is," and he says, "What are you doing here?" He says, What the fuck were you doing here?" And I said, I said to him, "What else do you expect us to do during this pandemic? This is what we're trying to do: stay isolated and yet stay socially engaged. It's hard." And I remember saying this to the officer, almost pleading to be understanding. This is hard on all of us. This isn't easy during this time. People, I didn't say this part, but I'm telling you all what my message by that, what I was trying to say is, some people don't have the people, the loneliness that this is really going through our nation, with people who are either elderly or don't have people who they live with or whatever. But I said what I said. I said this is hard on all of us, and I don't think that you're just said, this is hard on all of us. Yeah. Check through I have to make sure what I say, because I don't remember everything, but I do remember those major points. Checking.
Are these conversations happening where you're on the ground?
Yeah, I'm on the ground. Yeah.
Face down? Or back down?
That was earlier. That was earlier.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, were you were face down?
I know I was grabbed behind like this, held back onto the van, and put face down onto the car hood, and then I was put on the ground.
And did they put their guns away at some point, or their guns out? Do you know?
Once we were on the ground, and the officers were checking the van, the guns must have been in. How could they have done the gun at the same time?
Okay.
So, I mean, there's a lot of parts that probably were moving fast, and
it was so fast. It was so fast, Kenny.
But so you were restrained at some point. So you don't know how you got in that situation, but you were with restraint.
Yes. I wasn't just ordered out. I was grabbed out. I wasn't ordered out. Like, "Get out, step out the vehicle, sir." No.
And thrust onto the hood of your car, like you were pushed onto the hood of your car.
Yes.
Or the van.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
It was, yes, the van.
And
then onto the ground.
And then
and
then onto the ground. Okay, onto the van and onto the ground.
Yes. told to stay on the ground, kept my hands up, and then I remember my friend was sitting far from me, which is not, again, where is the access to language? I had said he is deaf, and I even said I'm going to interpret whatever's happening. There wasn't any allowance for him to understand what is happening. He was completely in the dark, so to speak, about what is happening. And I waved over to him as I was like this, and I tried to sign. And when I did that, they said, "Keep your fucking hands up." It was yelled at. And I yelled out saying, he is supposed to know what's happening, what's going on. He needs access. His access to language is signing. He needs to know what is going on. They didn't care.
Right.
Another vehicle came, pulled up, two other officers, and two other officers came, so a combined total of 4. And the officer that was checking the van with his flashlight turned to me and asked me for my ID. And I said, "Can I put my hands down?" Because if I put my hands down, I'm just afraid what you might do. And he said, "Get your fucking ID." And I said, "All right, I'm going for my ID." And I took out my ID. I handed it over and I said, "You can check me up. I work at such." I said, "I am an educator. And there's nothing on me. I have a clean record. Nor that matters, right? I'm saying here, nor that matters, because this is not the approach and the protocol that I think should be followed, by the way. Going back to the story, I said, I have a clean record. You won't find anything on me. Go ahead." And they did. And I just remember signing to my friend ID. He gave his ID. They checked. They came on over. And when they did get my ID, they went to go congregate the 4 police officers, and I think they were updating them what was happening and talking about us. The police officer came.
At that time, then do you remember whether your hands are then free to move? You're just sitting.
No.
So
so my hands had to be up still.
Okay, and then you're seated or lying?
I'm on the ground seated,
Okay.
with my knees bent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your friend is in the same position?
Yes, with his hands up, but on the asphalt of the street.
Okay.
In front of the car vehicle with the bright lights showing up on his face. Again, obscuring his own way to understand the world and not knowing what's happening. So the officer comes over and continues checking the vehicle. And I said, "You can check my rucksack. There's nothing. You'll find nothing in there. I have nothing to hide. Did
he ask to check it, or you invited him to check it?
When he touched it and he was looking, he wasn't looking in my rucksack, but he was looking around there. I told him he could.
Yeah.
And he did turn over and he did say, "I won't." You see, the thing is, I won't lie about what happened.
Yeah,
and this is what he did say. He did say, "Do I have your consent?" And I said, "Yeah, go ahead, because I have nothing to hide."
Yeah.
Giving, I think, those small factors into place that happened, I think allowed him yelling out, imagine the headlines, yelling out, he's deaf, many times, yelling out that I have nothing on the record, yelling out that you can check anything, I have nothing to hide. I think these things sort of like, all right, well, is this person who doesn't really have, it's fully transparent.
Yeah.
And he checked, and I have this little glass frasquito, this little jar with English breakfast tea. And so he's like, "What is this?" He says, "What the hell is this?" And I said, English breakfast tea. or a cup of morning tea? And he's like, what? And I said, what? I drink tea. And he put it back in. That was that about that. What else? These things are hard to dramatize or play out for another because everything happens
Yeah.
so fast.
What, how how long do you think the whole interaction went?
I told Andy más o menos 10 minutes.
Wow, but a lot happened in those 10 minutes.
It's very fast. Very fast, but very, a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
And then I was given my IV, and they said, all right, that's it. There wasn't any question. I suppose this is what I'm sort of upset about. I wasn't asked, did you hear something? Did you, like asking me inquiries? It was, the questions were posed pinning it on us.
Yeah.
What was that? What the hell was that? Who did that? It's like, those are questions with implications.
Yeah.
Those weren't questions to inquire the surrounding area.
Well, and the questions were asked with them pulling you out of your car, thrusting you against your own van, pulling a gun out at you. Like, this is not an investigation. That's not an investigation. Like, they're not trying to get to the bottom of it. They're looking to go after somebody, and those first few minutes are very dangerous minutes when you didn't know what your friend was going to do, and they have their guns out. Because that to me, that was what's scary to me in hearing the story, are those first few minutes when they have their guns out, they are already coming at you, and you have to have your hands up, and you are placed in that position of, is my friend not going to understand this, and he's going to get gunned down because of it?
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds to
I was really terrified for him.
So it sounds to me like, they use the excuse of some explosion to look into your file, because they're not asking, from what I hear, they're not asking as to where you've been, in the last, moments, and they don't even know what happened, really. They heard some explosion, and so it's first, engage with some subjects, right? Random subjects, look at their record. Maybe there's something there, and use as an excuse to, to pin you to that record. So it's not really investigative work.
No.
It's really to an excuse. And when Lipson brought this up to me, it brought me back to Nicaragua, and like 2 years ago when the government started repressing, openly, even though repression was happening, in the background. In that cops went from a, using excuses as, oh, hey, like, you committed a traffic violation because cops have that power over there, into now that, the government is openly repressing, is you're a terrorist, having a different excuse to pin down and look on people and extort people. And so, it just makes me wonder about where we're heading, and the extra powers that we're giving cops to use anything as an excuse to look into someone. And, like when I hear your story, and like, and not to take your, your story away, but it reminds me of my interactions with cops, where it is very, very nerve-wracking for anyone just to talk to a cop.
Under conditions of closer to martial law. Because what you're saying is that earlier, because I remember when I visited Nicaragua, you're like, well, cops are cops. They're going to get some money from you by doing traffic things. But it's almost like they do that, we give the money, it's all good. There's not that level of danger. But what you're saying is, when things went down and things were like closer to martial law, then the cops started to behave like what he just experienced.
Exactly. And basically they have more free range to have more power to, do what they can, what they want, and use anything as an excuse to excuse their behavior. And again, like, we are technically, under quasi martial law, where, they have certain powers, like, citing people for not using a face covering. And we know that, for example, for some immigrants, a broken tail light can get them into the custody of ICE, or someone that maybe for some whatever reason they were in the criminal system. An incident like this can get them back into the system. And so those are the things that I question, of how much power we are giving to cops in this nation, because we know that this nation is particularly violent. The cops, the police in this nation, it looks insane from outside in. Eduardo, you lived abroad. I've lived in Nicaragua and Guatemala, and people just look at this and it looks insane when you're outside. How many cops kill people for little things like this, or for selling a cigarette. You know, it's just amazing, and I'm glad that you're okay. It didn't escalate, but to your original point, it makes you wonder. Because I do remember, listen, you happened to be in the car. Remember, we were coming from Oakland. Hema was in the car. And we were crossing the Bay Bridge at night, and the windows were slightly tinted at the front, but that had been the case for that car for years.
Yeah.
And in that particular occasion, a cop pulled us to the Treasure Island, midway of coming back from Oakland to San Francisco, onto a dark area in a Treasure Island. And the reasoning first the cop said, "Hey, like, does he speak English?" I was a driver, completely like dismissed me because I was brown, and he was Latino, by the way. He was like probably born here, but he was of Latin background. And then he overpassed me and looked to my partner at the time, Hema, and he's like, "Does he speak English?" That was the first interaction. And then he proceeded to say, "Yeah, I fear for my security, because I couldn't see inside the car." So he pulled us into a dark area by himself because he feared for his security, to look into my record, and Lipson happened to be in the car, and, we thought it was bullshit at the end. And he ended up giving us a ticket. But again, in different circumstances, we know that in the mission, people have died, for these misunderstandings. A Guatemalan-born person who didn't understand English did rob someone and did go into the back, the trunk of a car. But the cops didn't ask any questions. They shot him 50 times.
Mm.
Here in the mission, and there's many other cases, or that other case where this other person was robbed, and he was chasing the two guys, and then two undercover cops in San Francisco approached him. He was already rattled. He was trying to get his bike back, and cops just attacked him, and then they ended up shooting him dead like 30 something times, because there is no investigative work into the circumstances, and it is scary. And I think there is a degree of arrogance that comes from the cops, where
use of power.
Yeah, and they don't ask questions. They don't like you were trying to explain the situation, but they weren't interested in that. They had their motives, and and sorry to keep this going, but one other time when I was in college in Berkeley, a very young kid, I was riding an electric scooter bought at Costco by my friends with a helmet. It didn't have a license plate because it didn't need to. It said in the manual. And cops pulled me over, sit me on the curb, and they didn't handcuff me, but they start asking whose bike is this? Whose scooter is this? And I'm like, it's my friend's. But this is my first interaction with cops. I was probably like 19, and they're like, you need to have a license plate. I'm like, no, I don't. It's in the manual. They, how come you don't? You must have a license plate. If it's on the street, you need to have my license plate. And they were arrogant about it, and they continued. And then they were asking me about my friend's name, and I couldn't remember because I was so nervous. I feared, because obviously you grew up in the mission, and the stories with cops, and so I couldn't remember my friends' names. And then eventually I was like, can I call them? Called them. They came over, and one of my friends who grew up in the Excelsior, who's more used to dealing with cops, she talked to them. And she's like, no, he doesn't need a license, you know. And the cop like went to investigate. Long story short, he came back saying, you know what, I don't know. But he didn't say I don't know. He said, okay, it's not clear. You can go now. Had the certainty that I needed a license plate to ride this, electric scooter that didn't go past 20 miles an hour. It's like a scooter today.
Yeah.
You know, but he had this certainty that I did, and that I was in trouble, and that I was committing a crime. But you know,
yeah.
But again, I'm sorry that you went through this. And
no, it's fine. You know, as I said, I maybe when I asked you right earlier, just few before my story, I asked you, Andy, why did you want to record? I guess I'm, what Kenny is talking about is sort of why I think I'm present to just the police harassment that exists because of abuse of power trips that exist that people have, and what Kenny is saying is arrogance. And I think that this pandemia is giving the state excuses and leeway and allowances, permission in the name of COVID-19 to bother us, to bully us. And if my story is out there, and if someone during this time feels that they need to have some proof that there are patterns that are existing within the police force, that's fine. I'm willing for it to be used. Again, I think my issue with the police on Thursday night is very mild. But it could have escalated had I not said maybe the things that I needed to say. Those little bits, those little phrases of whatever I had to say to defend myself. I can just imagine someone else maybe not knowing what to say and behaving irrationally because they're nervous, because they're anxious, because they're fed up with the police bothering them, and then being, taken to jail at the very least, or shot at the very worst.
I don't agree that that's very, what I hear is definitely does not sound mild. Like, it sounds like with guns and the approach they took at night,
Yeah.
it sounds like this was one small decision away from your friend getting killed, which is one small decision then away from two police officers left with one dead brown person and one live brown person figuring out how they keep their shit alive now. Do they have to put a gun on you? Do they have to put a gun on him? Do they have to shoot you to keep their profession, to keep themselves in the profession in this solitary? That's how that stuff starts to roll after a while, right? Like, it was one small situation that these people put in play because of their, I'm not going to call it unprofessionalism. I actually do think this is how the police are trained as it relates to, do I think this is COVID-19? What it tells me is that when Kenny said this is not the way our police operated until martial law in Nicaragua, is that we can at least say that if you're poor and you're brown or black, you live under martial law. That is what we can say. And we have, then the rest of us now who might not live under that form of martial law have to understand that this is what we are opening ourselves up to now when we give up all these rights. And like, I think the story I've been telling is like liberal people liberals I actually respect. I saw on Facebook when there, and I think this was a sideshow that was going on, and I think it was Latinos who were doing it. And the thing on Facebook was like, the National Guard should come in there and break that shit up. This is from liberals, basically saying that because people were doing a sideshow, and not doing 6 fucking feet of distance or whatever, that we want the police or the National Guard to come in there. I mean, what are we asking for here? Like, we are literally asking to be enslaved, and justifying it. And it's very, to me, this story could have happened a year ago, I still believe, but this is the country we live in, and this is not going to be nicer as a result of all the things we're signing on for. But most of all, it just brought home these people. I wanted to hear. Well, I was curious. I remember when I asked you, like, what was their demeanor as they left? Right? Was there even like, a bit of,
no apology,
nothing,
no.
nothing, like fuck you and move on. Like we
Yeah.
dragged you out of your car. We threatened your life over the sound of fireworks far away, and now we leave. I don't know what to call that. Like people who've been at gunpoint from being robbed, that stays with them the rest of their life.
Yeah.
And I don't think this is a story you're going to forget. And they did that. They didn't knock on the window and say, "Hey, did you hear that? Hey, do you have a moment to? We have some questions. Would you be willing to?" They can do it in a fucking investigation. Isn't that their job? I mean, it's a totally different thing, And I do believe that the lights were on your van and it showed who you were, and I believe that obviously played a role in how I personally believe that played a role in how they approached you.
Are you talking about profiling?
Yeah.
I mean, a question that maybe it's not clear yet. What is the location in this city where that happened?
At McLaren Park. It was at the park.
So McLaren Park is like close to the Baby, right? Isn't it?
Kind of. It's sort of like it's a different park that if it extends down and it gets attached to the Bayview, but I'm not sure you were necessarily. It also extends away from. It's more like Excelsior.
Yeah. But the Excelsior too. I mean, like these are areas that are a little more police than other areas.
Yes.
When we're talking about martial law and occupation, these are areas that are traditionally more lower income. And once you're getting closer to the Bayview, it's blacker.
Yeah.
And so there is a little more police, just like in the Tenderland, where there's a lot of homeless, Black and Latino people. This like in the Tenderland, for example, I know, like I was there not long ago, where it's not uncommon to see a cop every 2 blocks. It's not, But then you go to a place like West Portal, and cops are not very often seen around, but someone like me who frequents that area because him, I used to work there or works there, and it's afraid of lingering around because I don't want to be looked at suspicious. I don't want to have an interaction like this. But yeah, I mean that's just what I wanted to kind of point out, that again it's my suspicion. It doesn't have to be a fact that a lot of these areas that are more heavily policed, you're more prone to have these interactions, and than other areas in the city. And I mean, what another thing that comes up to mind when Lipson asks you about this question about the resolution of the interaction is that, in my experience, at the end they want to make it seem like they're doing you a favor by letting you go free.
Yes. Yeah. I did get the sense of that, like, we're letting you go. We're doing you this favor. Yeah.
And
their demeanor, their attitude, the way they spoke to me, the way they cursed at me, the way they approached me, the way they just blocked access from me to my friend, given that he requires ASL, American Sign Language, to be able to communicate. I just feel the entire thing could have been escalated to something else that could have happened. I was very fearful for him more than myself.
Mm-hmm.
I can speak. I can hear what's going on. I can see if they're coming at me. I have visual and auditory cues to understand that something might happen to me. But you have this person who has no access and has this bright vehicle lights on his face. How is he supposed to understand what is going on? So,
have you communicated with him post this? Have you?
Yeah, he he had to go to work right after.
Okay.
So he couldn't. The whole processing with him wasn't there because immediately afterwards he told me once we got in the vehicle, he said, I have to go to work." I told him, "Oh, all right, let's go." And we were driving, and we can't sign when he's driving because that's dangerous.
Yeah.
So he has to concentrate. Deaf people, by the way, in case anyone who's out there that listens to this, deaf people are allowed to drive. Anyhow, so we couldn't process it. He just dropped me off, and I told him, "Be careful and have a good evening." I felt really bad, but the following day, yes, we did talk some, and he felt as if this is normal. I mean, his attitude about it was just like, I wanted to ask him if this has happened to him before, and he felt that this was normal. He and I have different experiences in that sense. I feel as if it's similar to my brother. Sometimes when I talk to him and he tells me some of the things that have happened to him on BART, people look at him suspiciously. Those things to me are not normal. but they are normalized for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that's really sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just really sad. I have had instances where I've been with, like I said, with officers, and they haven't always been very nice, and other instances where I have been able to get people off of being arrested because of the way I think I know how to behave around. That's sad, right? That I know how to behave around police officers. But you shouldn't really, police officers shouldn't base what they're going to do with a person based on their attitude. Or, I feel as if when I spoke about this experience with another person yesterday, they said, well, you know how to behave, or you know what to say with a police officer. And I said, well, that's not the point. A lot of people have attitude, this person said. And that's why they get what they get, because they're looking for it. They're almost asking for it. And I said, what? But that's not how, as a society, I think we want. This is not the interaction that I think everyone, even, I don't know, there's something off about people saying that. It really, I understand why they say that, and not to say I understand it like I am okay with it, but it's not because they'll say these videos, look at how this person acted, but it's not the police officers to be policing attitude or policing judging based on those things. I don't know if I'm making myself clear. Kenny or Andy, jump in, please, because I don't know. I'm struggling to find. I think you both know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I think at least I think we've been led to believe that they are in our spaces, and they're given that power to protect us for our own safety. But I don't see it that way. Especially in this nation, the richest nation in the world, where we know, I think that's one thing we can all agree, that the most marginalized communities are the most heavily policed. And they don't ask questions first. They draw their guns out, and but yet at the same time, because I hear this in my own family, they know the police fucking sucks. They've seen it, we've called them and they don't do anything for us. They don't want to get to the bottom of anything. And then at the same time, I hear that same argument, Eduardo, and it's frustrating because there was an incident with the COVID-19 in New York where some kids were just kind of taunting cops, and I had a very good conversation with my family where I explained my point of view. Where and I think I talked to Lipson about it. That the way I see cops is that or the government in general, they're like a body, and the cops are the belt and they're the disciplinary, But if you're hungry, if you don't have shelter, if you don't have education, and all you see is the belt, that's how I explain it to my family, then you're gonna disregard the belt. You're gonna say fuck that belt. you're gonna hate that belt because you're getting belted all the time, you know. And then they want to, shape you into behaving decently, So no, like I understand why some of these kids like are like fuck these cops, because my only interaction with them is, discipline, discipline. They don't want to talk to me. They want to be arrogant and tell me, how it should be, not considering my circumstances. And but yet my family keeps saying, because I think it's someone like programming, brainwashing, that they're in it for our own good. Like someone else should be punished, and therefore we are policing other people too, and we're encouraging cops to do our bidding, thinking that we're protecting ourselves, thinking that that behavior is going to change just by belting someone else. And I don't think that's the case, But yeah, it is very contradictory and frustrating, that we want to give police more powers when they know they're not in it for us.
Yeah.
So, and that's the scary part, as we face more, this happens during the 9/11, right? The coercive apparatus of this nation was given unlimited power to in the name of our safety. And so will be the same thing with COVID-19. And, they will get more power in the name of your safety, our safety.
Exactly.
And so that's the scary part. How much more are we be willing to give up, of our freedom to exist, really?
I appreciate you sharing this, Eduardo. I think the only thing I can add is, well, one is like that cop they have that protect and serve thing on most of those cop cars, and I do think most people believe that they are protecting in some way, protecting and serving all of us in some way, shape, or form, even unfairly, and that's not true. That the police are an institution to protect and serve the capitalist class. That is why they exist, and they were, back in the day, their origins start with slavery and collecting the property of slave owners, and then moved on into a situation when people were concentrated into urban centers, and there was a rising labor movement of basically being a collective way of disciplining and smashing rising labor movement. Essentially protecting the maintenance of the property of the rich and the wealthy and the capitalists, and that's true in every country. That's the role of the police. But they will be more aggressive in a country where the class inequality is worse, and that I do believe is the reason for our prison population and the size of it, and it's the reason why they operate as if for a segment of our population that they operate as if it's martial law. And I just think I do think there's a message here for people who think. Do people really think that the same state which put this force in action, the police at home and the military abroad, do they really think that this same state is putting us in quarantine for ourselves, to help us? And this is the part that the left has gotten all wrong, like that I believe, which is to think that somehow the state suddenly is like, oh no, now there's a pandemic, we'll help you, we'll keep you safe. That I believe that is not what the state is operating on. And that has zero to do with why the state is putting us in quarantine. Zero. And because they're the same people who put these other forces in motion, which have nothing to do with our safety, but have everything to do with their maintaining their control. So those rules didn't change just because there's a virus spreading. Those rules were in play prior to the coronavirus. They're in play. They're in play as the corona, and they're going to be in play beyond the coronavirus. It's just a question of how much does the state get away with tightening its grip. And that this story is a cautionary reminder of the nature of our state to me, and whether it's because I think it could have happened, like you said, and it's not Miles' story. It is not a Miles story. Like, I understand how you say it's a Miles story, and I can understand how your friend, he's like, but anyone who thinks like it's very scary, and it's outrageous to think that kind of event could create this moment of near death for you, and for your friend, and that's our police.
And maybe, I don't know if we're getting close to wrapping up, but
yeah,
it also reminds me that the most vulnerable, the people with less of a say, get police, and the border is one of the most militarized. And I've heard people who work at the border who talk about it being a zone of occupation.
Yeah.
Where they're testing technology that will eventually probably make it to the bigger population. But they have face recognition at the border. They have
drones
everywhere. What's that? Drones. Yeah, they have the state of the art technology. In excusing it for our safety, the safety of our nation, right? And they use it on people that don't have a voice. Because these are migrants. They're not citizens, quote unquote. But and again, they do it in the name of our safety, in the name of the safety of the populations. But it's just things to think about, I think.
Do you have any last thoughts or things you want to share about this, Eduardo?
I'm just doing better. Yesterday, I think there was a process on Thursday night. I felt just shocked. And then Friday, I sort of was in denial that it was sort of important. I just thought that it couldn't have happened. Why would that happen? I mean, yeah, I know it happened, but sort of, I just can't believe it had happened. I sort of thought it was sort of stupid and funny. Not funny like I think it's a joke, but sort of the absurdity of it.
Yeah.
And then Saturday, I think I was upset. I was really upset when I called you. I thought this is really upsetting that I realized that the most, I think last I checked, it wasn't a crime to sit in your vehicle and chat away,
Right.
Yeah. And that's how I felt upset, because I thought, wait, what rights did they have to approach us in this way when we were just chatting? Again, it's not a crime anywhere just to sit in your vehicle, parked, I should say, because we weren't driving anywhere. We were parked and just chatting. And so I was really upset, and I remembered, and that upsetness, I shared it with you.
Yeah.
So, and then today I thought, I released a lot yesterday, sharing that with the people in my life, my immediate people in my life, meaning the household. And then I thought today, maybe this isn't as bad as what's really happening out there. So, again, me saying mild, maybe it's just me feeling it's, That's it for me.
I appreciate it. And I'm actually glad we have this, and we're going to make a decision about whether, I think this is something really worth sharing, because I think it's just a reminder, and it brings it home. For me, it brings it home of just, this is 1 degree away from all of us,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is the bonus episode of the week.
Yeah, so I don't think it's like sign off and web node. I think we just kind of like say goodbye. But
I was just getting into that.
Yeah, I know. But I appreciate you taking the time, because I myself was not sure. Like, maybe we're not going to do this, and I would have been okay with not. But now that we've gone through the whole thing, I actually think it's worth putting out there.
I'm all right with it too, and yeah.
So I'm going to probably press end on play here.
All right.
Okay.